Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly MPI seminar. We're here from Oxford and Washington, D.C., where it's quite warm here, in fact, unseasonably warm in Washington. And I understand that you had snow over there today. So great, wonderful weather for a conference. First up will be Rizwan Al-Haq. We're really looking forward to hearing what he and Sabina have to say on towards a moderate MPI for ISDB countries, indicator and methodological options. I'll let the local folks do the introductions there in Oxford, so take it away.
Hi everyone, welcome to our, I can't remember what number we're at, but our autumn seminar series on multidimensional poverty. Today we have Rizwan, Lhachi and Sabina presenting on their moderate MPI for ISDB countries. So I will hand over to Rizwan now.
Thanks, James. Thanks, and good afternoon, everybody. Well, I'll start by the main motivation of this study is that the 2030 SDGs agenda sets out the objectives to end poverty knowledge forms everywhere. So the catch is that the global MPI only captures the acute form of poverty. And what about those who have some sort of moderate poverty or who are not being captured by the acute form of poverty? And previously, OPHI has proposed a couple of moderate MPI prototypes. One with Sabina and Fanni and colleagues for 6 countries, and the other one for the Latin American countries with Fanni and other colleagues. So this whole research aims to expand the MPPI scope, focusing on the ISDB member countries, that is Islamic Development Bank member countries. There are around 58 total countries which are member of the ISDB. And for 42 of them, we have the global MPI data. So this study actually aims to have a moderate MPI for those 42 countries. So we have one of the constraint or one of the assumption is that we will be working on using the mix and the DHS, whatever we have for the global MPI. So that's why we'll be focusing on the 42 countries. So what we have, what are the options we have? One option is that the structure of the moderate MPI would be a superset of global MPI. What does superset means? That whoever is actually identified as poor according to the moderate MPI will be poor by the global MPI. So in a way, this will be a superset. So this is one kind of structure which is one of the options we have. And the other is the standalone structure of dimension and indicators. And it doesn't mean that we cannot borrow any indicator from the global MPI. We can borrow some of the indicators, but the whole structure, we might have different dimensions, we might have different indicators. And when we say that the superset of global MPI, so we have 10 indicators, 3 dimensions. So we have to have that structure more or less in a way. That would be a superset of global MPI. So these are the 2 options. In today's presentation, we are focusing on 5 in total options. We have the candidate measures, which are in a way superset of global MPI. So these are what we are gonna present today, the results, some of the results. And the main objective is to present the results. What options do we have? What are the challenges do we have? What are the different options we are still looking for some of the indicators? Looking forward to all the feedbacks, interactions with your colleagues so that we might think of something, because we are stuck in for a couple of dimensions. So that's the main objective of today's presentation. Sabina,
So a question is, how do we create a superset of the global MPI? And what that means is that what we'd like is everybody who's poor by the global MPI to be poor according to the moderate MPI. That's a working title. That title will shift. As Rizwan said, we have not decided to go in this direction. but we want to explore this, and we will also explore MPIs that are delinked from the global MPI structure. If, in order to fulfill the condition that everybody who is poor by the global MPI would be poor by the moderate MPI, there need to be 3 conditions. One is that in regard to the 10 indicators nested within 3 dimensions of the existing global MPI, and I should say that the 2024 results for the global MPI will be presented next week. So if you don't know the structure, they'll be explained in detail there, but they relate to health, education, and living standards. Now, everybody who is deprived in the revised indicator of the moderate MPI must be deprived in the original indicator by the global MPI. If that is not fulfilled, it will not necessarily be a superset. Second, the weights on the original global MPI indicators must be proportionately the same, and that is 1/6 of weight on each of nutrition, child mortality, years of schooling, and school attendance, and 1/18 of weight on housing, water, sanitation, electricity, cooking fuel, and assets. The final requirement is that the poverty cutoff must be identical to the global MPI, that is 1/3. With these conditions, there will be a superset. Now, there are different ways, therefore, to construct indicators for a moderate MPI, but there are 2 broad classes we can follow. One is quite straightforward, and it is to take the same indicator and to raise the deprivation cutoff. So, for example, instead of considering a household as deprived if any child is not attending school up to the age at which it would complete class 8, one would consider it deprived if any child is out of school up to class 10. And that is very simple, it's straightforward, it's transparent. The second option is to create a sub-index, but a sub-index, in order to be a superset, must be a union-based sub-index that will contain the global MPI indicator, so that anybody who's deprived in the global MPI indicator will be deprived in the sub-index. But the sub-index could have 1 or 2 additional components. One would be a higher deprivation standard, like 10 years of schooling. The alternative could be a different indicator. For example, a person could be deprived if they lack housing materials according to the original global MPI specifications, and if, in addition, they live in an overcrowded house. So that additional criteria of overcrowded house is a different indicator, and they are joined by and. So they are a sub-index, but they must be deprived if they lack good housing materials. But they may additionally be deprived if they lack good housing materials and are whether or not they lack good housing materials if they live in an overcrowded house. But there are challenges with a union-based sub-index. And so it's good, and we've spent a bit of time thinking about the options. One is to create a union-based sub-index like housing plus overcrowding, and simply have the original weight of the original global MPI indicator, in the case of housing, 1/6. Or, for example, in the case of school attendance, a child could be deprived if they are not attending school or they experience a school lag. And if that's the case, then we still have the same number of indicators, 10 weighted indicators within 3 dimensions. And so it's an easy to see parallel of the global MPI with higher standards, very much like what we already do with the destitution indicator. Furthermore, although the indicators are more complex, it is possible to take out policy relevant information by creating sub-index reports that would say how many children are not in school, how many children are only experimenting school lag, or how many households have children only experimenting school lag or only experimenting overcrowding. But it's not possible to see how many people are deprived in one indicator or both. and dimensional monotonicity among the subcomponents of the indicator is lost. That is, if somebody is deprived in both of the component indicators and then just becomes deprived in one, the MPI will not change. So there is an imperfect alternative. The imperfect alternative is to take the full weight of the original global MPI indicator and to divide it between sub-index components so they add up to the original weight of the global MPI indicator. But there are now two indicators instead of one. There could be more than two, of course. For example, we might want to look at electricity, which in many countries is almost a saturated deprivation, but in some countries remains an important deprivation. And we might want to be able to take out the censored headcount ratio and see how many people in this country are deprived in electricity. And then we might want to see how many additional people are deprived in lack of internet access. That is, they have electricity, but they lack internet access. And that is what we can see in an indicator in which one component is they lack electricity, whether or not they also lack electricity and internet. And in the second indicator, they lack electricity or internet. And so we will have the censored headcount ratios for both of the indicators, the original electricity one, and it could have half of the weight. But also, if in moderate MPI countries, many people have electricity, then it might only take 10% of the weight and 90% would include internet. But we would still be able to see very transparently with censored headcount ratios or percentage contributions, the components of that. And there is some imperfect dimensional monotonicity because the full dimensional monotonicity is not there, but there's a component of it, MPI indicator. So that's, in a sense, what we've done in candidate measure 5. Rizwan will describe the 5 candidate measures that he and Lhachi have created. And I must say he and Lhachi have done the empirical work, and hats off to both of them. But the first 2 measures are focused on looking at the gendered components of education, and then at doing one of these experimental sub-indices, and then to looking at a lot of different applications of this alternative weighting structure. There's still much to be worked out, and I'm seeing as I read it that in some slides, some ands should be or. But I think you have the idea and the motivation for having a superset, but with some dimensional monotonicity and some ability to see the underlying information instead of having them combined into a union-based sub-index, which requires a separate takeout policy section in order to understand the policy implications. Back to you.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier that we have in total 42 Islamic Development Bank member countries, and we are trying to do a trial run for 12 selected countries from different regions. And this is just a starting point for those 12 countries we have selected. We have done work for these 4 countries. 2 of them are from Arab states and 2 are from Sub-Saharan Africa. And Nigeria has quite a, I'll show you the results for the global MPI. So it's a mixture of the countries in a way that those with very high global MPI ratios, and for them it's very quite low. So I hope now the screen is being shared. So as I was saying that we have these 4 countries, Jordan, Gabon, Nigeria, and Iraq. For 2 of them, Jordan and Gabon, we have DHS data, and this is the latest data which we have for these countries from DHS. And similarly for Nigeria and Iraq, we have NICS data. These are the results from the global MPI, which will be launched, which has been launched, and the results will be public next week, perhaps. So we can see that in Nigeria, 33% people are global MPI poor. In Jordan, there is only 0.43%. In Gabon, it's 8.65%, and Iraq is around 9%. So we can see that some of the countries is very, poverty is quite huge, and for others it's very low. So these are the candidate measures we are actually presenting today, and we have the results for them.
Oh, yeah.
The little.
It's extended.
Oh, it's sent to the other side. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are the 5 candidate measures. We have the results today, and I'll explain a bit of the details of these candidate measures. For candidate measure 1, we have, rather than having a global MPI nutritional indicator, we have in the global nutritional indicator, we have a person below 70 years of age for whom nutritional information is available is malnourished. Whereas for the moderate MPI, we have also included obese as well. And for obesity, for adults 18 and above, if the BMI is 30 and above, then that person is obese. And for children less than that, it's regarding the less than 3% of the Z-score. And child mortality is the same, which we have for the global MPI. A child 0 to 18 years has died in the last 5 years period preceding the survey. For the years of schooling, for the global MPI, we have no eligible household member has completed 6 years of schooling. And the eligible person is that up till the age of starting age, whatever the starting age, and then we that is 10 and above, the eligible person for years of schooling. Global MPI.
Depends on the starting age.
Yeah. So considering the countries, because they have different starting age of school. So that is global MPI. And for the moderate MPI, we have years of schooling. We have 3 options actually. In a way, these are 2 options. One is the gendered one, that for in each household, at least one male and one female would have completed 9 years of schooling. And we see that if the starting age is perhaps, if for example is 6, then we have then 15 years of age and older. And if the starting age is 5, then 5 plus 9 is 14 years of age or older. So in this indicator, in each household, there should be a male and female member who has 9 years of schooling. And the other option is female years of schooling and male years of schooling separately. So each household should have a female, 15 years of age if the starting age is 6. And similarly, male years of schooling, that each household should have a male with 9 years of schooling. Then child's school attendance is the same as the global MPI. Any school-age child is not attending school up to the age at which she would complete. Sorry, we have changed it. In the global MPI, it's 8 years, and now we have made from 8 to 10. And school age boy or girl up to the age at which she would complete grade 10 has 1 year lag. Now we are just considering a 1 year lag, but in the next candidate measure, we might think of 2 years gap. And those who are out of school, they are also considered deprived in this school lag indicator. For housing, we have water. A household doesn't have access to safe piped water in the premises. So in the global MPI, it was that if it is from the safe source and with a time less than 30 minutes, if that is accessible within 30 minutes, then that is non-deprived. Sanitation, a household doesn't have flush toilet, which is not shared with any other household. And so again, we have made some changes with the global MPI. In the global MPI, we have different other options for the toilets. And so here again, we have made some changes. Now the next challenge is cooking fuel, because we have this almost the same indicator in the global MPI. Household cooks with kerosene, oil, dung, agricultural crops, shrubs, wood, charcoal, or coal. Here we have included kerosene here, but apart from that, this is, as I said earlier, that we have discussion points, we have some challenges. So this is the big challenge, that how would we make it a bit, in a way, moderate as compared to the global MPI. And then the next challenge is electricity and internet. So it's almost electricity the same as we have in the global MPI. For housing material, this is the global MPI indicator. A household has inadequate housing. The floor is made of natural material, or if the roof or walls are made of natural material or rudimentary material. So we made a change that all three roof, floor, and walls should not be from natural or rudimentary material. So this is what we have made, proposed the change. And for assets, in the global MPI, we have 2 or more assets should be there for a household to be non-deprived. And here we say that more than 2 assets. If a household does not have more than 2 assets, these are the assets and plus or a car or truck. So these are the changes which we made in assets as well. So if we look at in all the indicators, so for schooling, we might have a discussion point whether we should have a gendered views of schooling, or we have separate for male and female. And similarly, for child school attendance plus lag, 1 year lag or 2 year lag, these are the discussion points which we might have. For living standards, for some of them we have challenges, and we really would like to have feedback how to tackle the issue. And for health, that is the biggest challenge, that for child mortality, that is the same as the global MPI. So this is we are looking for some other health indicator which we will feed into with the household data sets, because we have looked into the mix and the DHS, but we couldn't find any other alternative to the child mortality. So these are the 5 candidate measures. And as Sabina mentioned, we have played with the weights as well. For example, candidate measure 5. So we have also included the nutrition indicator of the global MPI and give it a weight of 1.7%. And the nutrition of the moderate MPI, give it a weight of 15%. And in total, they have the weight of 16.7%. And child mortality, as I said, that this is a challenge, but still we are keeping it in these candidate measures. Similarly, for candidate measure 5, which is labeled as CM5, years of schooling, the global MPI is there, and we combine it with the gendered one for this trial. We can also play with the female and male years of schooling. So we have given 1.7% to the global MPI and the rest 15%, because the total weight of in the global MPI, this indicator has a weight of 16.7. So we simply divide it into 2 and give it very small weight to the global MPI indicator. For child school attendance and lag, we combined in the candidate measure 5 I'm referring to. So we gave a weight of 11.1 and 5.6. So the 2/3 of the weight is given to child school attendance, and school lag gets 1/3. So as I said earlier, that a child, if that child is out of school, that child would automatically be deprived in school lag as well. For the living standard, we have just in electricity and internet, we combine these 2 and we split the 5.6% of the weight between these 2 and gave 5% to electricity and internet, and electricity alone is 0.6%. So these are the structures, and we have played with different weights and with different options. And I'll present the results. But before that, would you like to? I'll give it to Lhachi to give some feedback on overview of the years of schooling. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to be talking a little bit about some further analysis and decisions that we've been making in the microdata, especially with regards to the years of schooling indicators, because we've included like a new gendered element to it, which is different from the global MPI. So as Rizwan already explained, we have 2 main indicator options, one that has includes a deprivation of both a man and a woman within a household. And then we have two other indicators, one for female-only years of schooling and male-only years of schooling. But for these indicators, because of varying household demographics in different countries, and within the 4 trial countries that we've seen, it affects the way the results, the demographic composition of the households affect the results. So I'm just going to explain a little bit more on that. So in this table, first we have, okay, so before any of that, I'm sorry. For those who aren't familiar with the construction of MPIs, when we construct indicators, we start at the individual level. We look at the deprivation of all the eligible members in a household that have the information for the indicator that we're looking for. And for the years of schooling indicator, they are individuals who should have individuals at the age at which they should have completed 9 years of schooling formally. In most countries, the starting school age is 6, so the cutoff becomes age 15. But again, it differs depending on the starting school age. But for these 4 countries, it's individuals age 15 and above. So the eligible population for which we start the individual level construction of the indicator is males and females in households above the age of 15. So these are the percentages of populations in these 4 countries that live in a household with an eligible member. You can see that Iraq by far has the most uniform structure in households because they have an eligible male and a female in 98.68% of their population. And in contrast, Gabon, not sure. But and then in contrast, you can see that in Gabon, there are almost around 15% of households that don't have an eligible male and about 8% of households that don't have an eligible female member. And so there are only around 78% of the sample that has an eligible man and a woman. And because the indicator is being constructed for the man and the female, it affects the results. So now here we have the individual level deprivations for males and females for the countries. And you can see that in Jordan, there's not a lot of disparity when it comes to educational achievements for females and males. But for Nigeria, it's the highest. Yeah, I think, and then followed by Iraq and Gabon. And overall, you can see that females are in general more deprived than males in terms of years of schooling. And Iraq by far has the highest deprivation rates for both males and females among our 4 trial countries. So the first indicator that we looked at is the years of schooling indicator that has both genders. So in this indicator, a household is deprived if at least one male or female has not completed 9 years of schooling. But if individuals in the household who are eligible have formally, at least one individual has, at least a man and a woman have completed 9 years of schooling and none have this achievement, the household is deprived. Sorry, I got confused there. But yeah, so here you see that we have the individual level deprivations that I showed in the previous slide. And then when you aggregate it to the household level, you get these results. But the missing column here indicates all of the households that don't have an eligible man and a woman. And you can see that, again, it's the highest for Gabon because we have only around this much of the population that have both eligible members. So for households that with eligible members only from one gender, so for single-sex households, what the decision that we've taken so far, which isn't final, so please let us know your suggestions if you have them. We replace the missing or non-eligibles with the educational achievement of the sole gender. And when we do that, we see that the results change in this way. And it's not that different from if we just keep it the achievement of both genders. So the results don't change as much between these two. And then we look at years of schooling in terms of female achievements and male achievements. So for female years of schooling, a household is deprived if no woman has completed 9 years of schooling in a household. Again, we have the individual level deprivations. We take it to the household level. These are the results at the household level. And then again, for households without an eligible female, we've carried over the deprivation profile of the male. And you can see that the results stay consistent for most countries, except again in Gabon, where we've seen that the household structure isn't as uniform. So it's pushed up the deprivation by about 3 percentage points. And then we have male years of schooling, where a household is deprived if no man has completed 9 years of schooling. And again, we have the individual level deprivations and how the individual level deprivations, and then they're aggregated at the household level. And then again, the missing here represents the households that do not have an eligible man. And you can see that for Gabon, that is quite a high percentage. And for those households without an eligible man, the deprivation profile of the female is carried over. And then we minimize the missings, but if you can see for the household level, at the household level for male years of schooling, for Gabon, the numbers go significantly higher when we carry over the deprivation profiles for the females. So we might be causing a bias in that. So we wanted to open up the floor for discussion on that as well.
The next slides are actually showing the results. Sorry about that. There would be some typos because the computer works very slow. So these are actually the uncensored headcount ratios for the trial measure 1. And here, if we look at, I can give you some results from recalling them. So for example, for water, if I look at for Jordan and Iraq, the global MPI uncensored headcount ratios are around 1%. But here, they are quite a bit, around 40%. So the moderate MPI indicator for water, there's a huge jump from 1% to 40 in 40s. So this is just showing you the added advantage of, as I said earlier, that the acute poverty is being captured by the moderate, by the global MPI. So here, Jordan and Iraq, they have just 1 percentage point of uncensored headcount ratios for water, but here we have around 40%. And similarly for Jordan, the electricity is almost, there is no deprivation. And here again, when we combine it with electricity and internet, we can see that for Jordan, it's around 33%. So these are just the added advantages of these indicators. And these are the results for headcount ratios. Sorry about M0, this is MPI. And so Nigeria is around 60%, Jordan 26%. And we remember that for the global MPI, the Jordan results are very, really less than perhaps 1. Just one caution that these results are based on the recent data, whereas for the global MPI, 2024 results are based on the previous survey. The survey is a bit different, but yet we can see that there are huge jumps. Gabon, it was around 8%, and now we can see it's 53%. And same is the case with Iraq. So this is the candidate measure 1. And so these are censored headcount ratios. Again, we can see that still for water is around, if I give example of Jordan, Iraq, 15 and 24%. And even in Jordan, for electricity and internet, it's 15%. So we can see the added advantage. And for other indicators, it's a bit tricky. For example, for years of schooling, when you combine it with gender, naturally it goes up because we are now previously we had just 1 person who has minimum years of schooling, but here the indicator captures both male and female. So these are the percentage contributions. And for Nigeria, we have 9 indicators for the global MPI, and same is the case with the moderate MPI. So that's why the child mortality has, in a way, quite a bit of the share. The share is quite a lot. For other countries, it's very, very small. And similarly, male years of schooling for Iraq is quite high, and that is very small in Gabon. So we can see there is quite a bit of variation, and things are coming up. I mean, for male years of schooling for Iraq is really astonishing that why we are having male years of schooling in Iraq. This is uncensored headcount ratios for candidate measure 2. And as we can, because it's huge exercise, we have different candidate measures. So recalling them or connecting them and might be difficult. But the main point or main essence is that we can have an added value of these indicators. And same is the case if you look at the results, 54% for Nigeria, and again for Jordan and Gabon is quite a bit of high as compared to the global MPI. I'll show to the candidate measure 5, which was in a way the results for. This is the candidate measure 5, where we have combined global MPI indicators with the moderate MPI, and gave a small weight to the global MPI and give a larger weight to the moderate MPI. And here again, the results are quite, significantly high for these countries. And so the option or the question to the to this forum is that which options should we adopt for the years of schooling, whether the gendered one or male and female combined, and for those where we don't have any eligible male or female, how to tackle the option we had for the health indicators, which we are really looking forward to. Thanks.
Thank you, Rizwan. Thank you for the Chief Sabina. We'll go to time for questions now. I think we'll start in the room. Any questions here for panel?
Good.
If not, James, I'll pass to you.
Right. So I've enjoyed listening to you. Now, for the people who are listening, what's happening is when Sabina said that we're talking about unioning variables, in essence, what you're doing is taking one variable that already exists and you're saying, well, let's also count in the idea that another variable might be at a deprived level. And then those two together will either or typically will make it so that you are deprived in that variable. So you're already going to be, if you are already deprived in the first one, which is the MPI, global MPI variable, and then you add in the second one, there's a margin of people who have that alone, and that's by which it goes up. There's also a margin of people that have both, and that's counted in the original global MPI numbers. So do you see what I'm saying? The whole exercise here, or at least a good part of it, if you ignore the missing data type of considerations, is how do you change the underlying variables so that you can evaluate higher levels of living that are now considered to be deprived by either raising, and that's a kind of union as well, because you're including all the people that have the lower cutoff that they're satisfied, but now the group that's from the lower to the upper cutoff, that is added in as an additional consideration in constructing at the individual dimensional level. So I'm trying to explain the overall idea here of moving from an acute measure to one that's moderate. It's adding in these other considerations that raise the number of people who are deprived for a particular variable that we've been using for global MPI. The problems were then outlined. The outline is how do you deal with the fact that you're combining not just years of schooling, but years of schooling by gender? And that's a great way of augmenting the years of schooling variable to say, well, I'm going to take into account those that are, that don't have, in fact, representation from both genders in the household. And if you don't, then that kind of adds in a higher level, because they may have males but no females. That no longer counts to keep you out of deprivation. And you may have females and no males, vice versa. So the problem there, however, is that since you're dealing with now households that actually, not all households have the representation in their membership that would allow that to occur. And then how you add in the union-based stuff. So I can see the underlying theory of it and how you would want to do it. It turns out, in my way of thinking about it, once you start building off of a global MPI to get the moderate MPI, that's one approach, and that's what you've looked at. You then have kind of a ad hoc changes to the global MPI to create the moderate MPI. And these include fiddling with weights and fiddling with other things to make it make sense. Alternatively, one might start anew and say, well, here's what we would have using data for a moderate MPI, ignoring anything that went on before. And would those two things actually match? They may not. The clean start is one that would be more perhaps internally consistent, but then you'd lose the comparison with and the requirement of a person being poor under the acute, being poor under the moderate potentially. So I get all this, the requirements here. I frankly don't know what to do about the male-female issue and representation in households that's plagued MPI anyway for a while. If you don't have kids, then the kids stuff can't work. And so therefore you must make some kind of an assumption. And as far as health is concerned, it depends on what data are there. What's interesting is, what I'm interested in is thinking of this process of relating MPIs. If you can find a way or a kind of language that would allow greater interpretation of the new MPI in terms of the old, just by looking at a graph, for instance. For instance, you divide it into, here's the male, here's the female alone, and here's the intersection, and actually could look at each of the columns in terms of these divisions. It might actually clarify what is going on underneath the moderate measure and comparable, make it more comparable to the acute measure in that case. Those are all the comments that I have in terms of looking at this as a kind of theoretical exercise. I suppose I should mention that in my applications of the MPI to other situations like the Statistical Performance Index, we were very interested in the nested nature of variables. So you're talking about nesting variables. And you have a basic, let's say electricity, and then you have a requirement. That's a requirement of actually the next level, which is connected to the internet. And so the nesting of variables and how you handle that, it almost generates a kind of cardinality of various variables. And that's part of what you're kind of dealing with here, because when you don't go to the de novo moderate, you want it to be so that the acute implies the moderate. And yet there is a difference between just having electricity and having electricity and broadband. So I think that there's some competing desires here that are going to play out. Maybe they should be thought of more theoretically in order to see if there's a principle that would allow us to build up the moderate MPI. I'm not sure. Those are my observations. Would love to hear what Rizwan and Sabina have with respect to these observations.
Fantastic, James. No, I mean, we were talking, and let's take them in turns, about gender. Our working hypothesis, based on Lhachi's work, is that we have a problem. Because if we do the male years of schooling and female years of schooling, on paper, it seems to be the most transparent. And it seems to be the clearest. And you can say this many, more households have males who have not completed X years of schooling, 9 years of schooling, and females. However, because of the demographic substitutions that Lhachi mentioned, because of eligibility, and the fact that the percentage of substitutions varies across the genders, actually, those numbers are quite fuzzy. And so in terms of Atkinson and mapping the total error The total error includes, in this case, not just sampling error, not just missing, but also the swaps due to eligibility. And in a country like Thailand, that will be even larger. So our working hypothesis for others to comment on, and that we will check by doing this demographic analysis for additional countries, is that the indicator that is quote unquote gendered is the best. That is, there is one number in which a household is deprived if it does not have at least one male and one female who have completed 9 years of schooling, one of each gender. However, that doesn't give you information on the gender disparities. And so that's where what Rizwan and I have done earlier of looking within the household, using that individual level data and looking at if there are statistically significant differences between male and female years of schooling, going back in a sense to what Lhachi presented first as the individual male deprivations and individual female deprivations, where the denominator is the individuals. That's clean. That doesn't have the sampling error from replacement. And you can look at statistically significant disparities. So that seems to be the more rigorous approach. However, that does mean you have one indicator, and then you have a pull-out box with gender disparity. And how can we communicate that to different audiences? I'm trying to look at Maya about this point. So that's the working hypothesis on gender, which others could improve, could kick our tires, say what they think. But based on Lhachi's work on Gabon, we got scared with just doing male and female years of schooling separate. Then in terms of the other indicators, let's take electricity and internet. So hypothetically, let's say 10% of people are deprived in electricity and 50% of people are deprived in internet. Technically, it could be that 10% of people are deprived in electricity, 10% of people are deprived in electricity and internet. So everybody deprived in electricity is deprived in internet, plus 40% are deprived in internet. That would be the case where we have the global MPI indicator of children with 6 years of schooling and children with 9 years of schooling. Everybody who doesn't have 6 years of schooling will also be deprived in 9 years of schooling. So it's clean. With electricity, internet, it's probably pretty clean, but we'd have to check it. What that means is that the additional indicator is bringing into view 40% of people who are not deprived in electricity, but are deprived in internet. And so what I feel, and I think Rizwan and Lhachi were still in discussions, is that dimensional monotonicity is important. We've seen that in measures that don't have it. And that there's no celebration if people who are only deprived in internet get internet, but don't also get electricity, or any who are only deprived in electricity but not internet get it, and internet doesn't come down. So I think in the interest of dimensional monotonicity, we would want some weight on each of the components. However, in terms of communication, that means instead of having 10 indicators, we might have up to 20. And so there are trade-offs here. I think this is 4 countries. As Rizwan said, we'll next go up to 12 countries and eventually to 42 countries. And so any thoughts at this stage are very, very welcome. And we'll also, of course, be doing non-linked moderate MPI options. But I think that these are some of the considerations that seem quite strong. And James, it does come down to theory, because if we have a basically separate gender disparity measure, it's not part of the original MPI. And so there's no dimensional monotonicity if gender disparity goes down. So is that worse than having an imperfect male and female indicator inside? So nothing seems clean or perfect in this world. And so I think, as usual, we'll say more research, more empirical applications are required to see the magnitude, at least in these batch of countries, of inaccuracies from the different ways of proceeding, that for now the door is open to consider all alternatives. But if there are considerations that we haven't seen, I think that's what this seminar is really hoping to raise. And Lhachi, Rizwan, if you have other things.
While they're going up there, I'll just mention, so the big issue is whether the variables are nested. That is the big issue first. Is it the case that we're dealing with a very clean variable, as you called it, where you go up to something that includes the previous one, or whether that's not the case. So it's really important to look at the empirical nesting of the variables under consideration first. And that'll take care of 90% of the discussion of this seminar. And then the question becomes those troublesome areas where missing data essentially is there. Although reality is that there isn't a woman in the household, and we just have to think how to deal with it.
So in the case of nutrition, it's nested. School attendance is nested. Sanitation, water, cooking fuel are nested. School attendance is not if we include lag. Housing is not if we include overcrowding, and electricity is not if we include internet. So those are the 3 problem children. But the rest that are nested, I think you're suggesting we go to the Statistical Performance Index, look at the graphics, the visualizations, and that does seem better. I don't know if...
There is a downside, because if you want dimensional monotonicity, you have to have a cardinality of it, so that having one gives you part of the weight and having the other gives you all the weight. And, or, there's steps. And that's what we did in the Statistical Performance Index. We had steps always. Anytime we had nested variables, we reflected that increase so that it could be policy relevant. But it's a trade-off because the consistency with the original MPI measure is less. There's the trade-off.
Are there other measurement environments in which there is this kind of trade-off, and are there words for them? Principles?
Yeah, I don't know. None come to me immediately.
We like your expressions.
So he's presenting.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. I'll just be normal.
No, do express.
Okay. If you look at the same thing happened with the Better Jobs Index, because the 4 dimensions there without K cutoff were in the labor force, employed, formal job, living wage job. And the latter 2 required employment. We didn't explicitly take into account any difference. We just gave them 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, because, as you might imagine, that sort of made sense, even though it was a kind of nested situation, which cut down the number of potential profiles substantially to just have 5 profiles, I believe, overall, or maybe 7. In any case, that is the choice, whether you leave them with individual weights that are making sure that dimensional monotonicity is holding, or whether, because you start with a MPI, global MPI, that has weights as given, and you want to have consistency, you latch on the weighted variable and just essentially all you're doing is raising the cutoff with that nested variable. No matter how it is, it isn't actually raising a cutoff. It's actually adding in conditions that lead to more people satisfying the conditions, effectively raising a cutoff conceptually. So those 2 approaches are going to compete with one another. But, if you can find a way of mapping it in, I can see going the way of just adding in variable and not with the dimensional monotonicity, but just changing the definition of the variable. I can see where you would still be able to depict what has happened as a result of the change through color coding or separating out the 3 cases, one, the other, or both.
James, any other questions, comments in the room, online?
This is really in the weeds, folks. So my apologies to people who are not living with us as snakes in the grass. But these are the kinds of considerations that you have, the principles of how you extend one measure to another so that you can have comparability to some extent and continuity of meaning, Or, you know, we have to maybe think of an entirely different thing. It's the basic problem of measurement. Meaning of the measure and what gives it grounding.
Thanks, James.